my beautiful people. Man, so I've really been struggling with this one, but I have finally decided to share with you guys my life story. And it there is a lot of strength and a lot of healing that comes in being able to share your story. And so I am so thankful to you guys for giving me a safe space to be able to speak. And yeah, it'll give you a little bit of perspective as to who I am and why I am the way that I am, you know? So I was born almost 32 years ago in 1991. I obviously was an oops baby. My parents did not intend to have me when they were so young. My dad was 18 years old, my mom was 19. And my dad not obviously, but my dad did not want me. And so from the beginning, when he found out that my mom was pregnant, of course, you know, he wanted her to get rid of me. And my mom was very clear. My mom was like, this is my baby. And whether you choose to be in our lives or not, I am having this baby. And I'm very thankful for that, obviously. And clearly she stuck to her word. So yeah, I was born. And when I was born, from what I know, my father was not present for a while. And so my mom, thankfully, with her friends from college and her mom, they kind of just like raised me. They figured it out. You know, my mom was like, she didn't, I all the time people tell me how, when I would cry, she would cry. And we would just cry together. But she figured it out. And I'm thankful because I'm truly a baby, you know, raised by the village. And I'm thankful for all the people who came together in, you know, making this possible. So when it got to a certain point, I guess my parents, they were still together. I don't even know all that story, obviously, before I was born or when I was a tiny baby. But my dad and I, we've always kind of been strained. Let me say that. It was clear he didn't want me, and I felt it from the beginning, and I've always kind of like, you know. So when my mom was about, like, okay, when I had stopped breastfeeding, let me say that, when I no longer needed my mom in that sense, my grandparents thought it was a good time for my mother to come to the States and further her studies. And then when she was ready, you know, she would bring me to be with her. And so I remained in Kenya when she was here. And as I mentioned, of course, nobody can tell you who to love, especially not your parents. My mom did the exact thing that she shouldn't have done, and she bought my father a ticket, and she brought him to the States, and she set up his life, and they eloped, and they started their lives out here. And so I was left with my grandma, and my grandparents, they are amazing. They gave me a sense of stability. They gave me a home. They showed me love the best way that they could, and I appreciate them and love them, you know, and I thank God for them. And I did experience a lot of love growing up. But the thing is, I also did experience a lot of pain, a lot of violence. I felt like, for me, if there's something that I hated, was childhood. I hated being a kid. I hated being a child. I hated being told what to do. I hated that my parents were away from me. I hated that some people, my grandparents, like I said, were amazing, but I did have caregivers. As you know, in Kenya, we have a lot of maids and caretakers and all that. Like, we call them house managers now. And so you've seen, you know, we've seen all over how some people, children can be mistreated by anybody, to be honest. And so for me, man, I went through it. I had, you know, and then it was, for whatever reason, you know, even the people who loved me, like, I did have people who are related to me who also hurt me, you know, for the little things. I felt like I really wasn't allowed to be a child. I felt like I couldn't really be me. I felt like I needed to walk on eggshells because I didn't know what would trigger somebody, you know, and how I would end up getting beaten for it. You know, when I was about 4 years old, when my mom had left, I do remember one day not eating. And I was, you know, as a kid, which child does not have issues eating? And my uncle came home, and I think he was a little drunk, and he ended up breaking my arm as part of punishment, I guess, for me not eating. And this is me at 4 years old. And it was hard to process, because it's like, okay, this is somebody who I love and somebody who loves me, and he claims to love me. I know he loves me. He's great, he's fun, but ultimately, like, pain, you know? And I mean, that was just an example of like the things that I would go through as a kid. And so you kind of just try and live life because that's your reality, but you're always on guard, because you don't know who it is today who's gonna come home upset and rain their wrath on me. And when I say wrath because it was the ridiculous things. It was somebody tying my arms and legs, you know, and putting me in a bucket of cold water. Not even really a bucket. Yeah, it's a bucket. That's what we can call it. And put me in a dark closet, and I would sit there for hours. Oof. And as a child, you don't really know how to process and how to deal with such a thing. But the thing about me, like I mentioned before, repression was the thing. So when an ordeal or crazy, scary ordeal like that happened to me, when I got my arm broken, when I was put in a dark closet, when I had those moments happen to me, I questioned a lot of the time, like, why I was born. I miss my parents miserably, because I thought that they would be able to save me from this madness. You don't even begin to understand what that feels like. Your brain, and as a child, you don't even understand. Even now, as an adult, you see the things they trigger me, and I still can't tell you. I can tell you now. But it took a lot of years for me to be able to deal with those things. And I prayed and I hoped and I wished, and and I couldn't wait for the day that I would come to America and I would be with my parents. Now, my mother, bless my mom. God, thank you for my mother. My mom, as far away as she was from me, she made sure that everything I needed, I had. She made sure that I went to the best schools. She made sure that I went, I had the best clothes. She made sure, literally, I used to have my pens engraved with my name and my pencils. My mom was super extra. I love it. She showed me love, and she always reminded me that no matter the distance, like, she is my mother and she loves me and I am loved. And that was something that was clear. She made sure that on my birthdays, I was celebrated and I knew that I was loved. And no matter how much I missed them, my mom made sure that she tried. She called me as much as she could. We had a phone at home. Cell phones were not really big at that time. She would call me in school. She would call me at home. She would call me as much as she possibly could. And she made sure that no matter how far we are, I know that I have my mom and I can talk to my mom and I can tell my mom anything. And I know it broke her heart in those situations. Like when we talked and somebody broke what do you mean you broke my child's arm? And there's so many things I couldn't even express to her because she was so far. And I wish she was there with me. Now, when I was around 9, almost 10 years old, finally my mother brought me to the States. My dad and I, we kind of talked here and there, but our relationship was always strained. It was clear from the beginning he didn't want me. And it was also, when somebody doesn't like you, And so you kind of like, keep your distance. At least I know that for sure. Defense, my guard up always. So when I finally came to the States, my dad, first of all, made it very, very clear that I do not want you here. I didn't want you here. I told your mother that I didn't want you here, and your mom went against my wishes and she brought you here to America. So I don't think you're ready. I don't understand how my father, my parent, who has been away from me for such a long time, how he didn't think I was ready to be around my parents. But with time, I came to understand exactly what it was about my dad. Now, my dad is a classic narcissist. He is an abusive man. He is an abusive man. And what none of us knew was that he was horrible and abusive towards my mother. The hell that I thought I was going through back home, couldn't even imagine what my mom was going through. And so when I got here, my dad, first of all, his secret was threatened. The thing about an abuser is that they coach you and they start to, they slowly edge at you and edge at you, and they come at you slowly. They kind of find ways to break you down. They isolate you. They create, instill fear in you so much that you can never even speak, because you truly believe that this person is going to kill me. And my father wants to kill my mother, has wanted to kill my mother for a very long time. I can't even explain this to you guys. And so when I came to America, of course, he didn't like it. And he tried. He would come at me and trying to put me down, you know. He would call me fat. He would just try in many ways to break me down. Isolation. I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to go outside and play. I was not allowed to do anything beyond his control. He had to control how I dressed. He controlled what I watched. He controlled how long I watched it. He controlled everything. And I understand, as your parents, you know what I mean? Yes. You said you choose how your children will live, but then you cannot control everything, because that's not how life works. We have no control, and you have to let your child be a child and be themselves. And so I had to find a way to just be on guard, because you just never know what this man is going to do today, you know. And again, more violence. So when I came to the States, I guess for the most part, he had to change and adjust, because of course he used to beat on my mom and he used to beat on her hard, but ultimately nobody knew, and he had to put it in a way, make sure that even I don't know, right? But the thing was, I think because he wasn't able to maybe beat on her as much as he used to, now he redirected all that onto me. And so come home, you haven't finished your homework, gosh, war. You're cooking, you drop a plate or you drop a spoon, war. Like, he used to look for any reason whatsoever to hurt me. He already made it clear he doesn't like me. He already made it clear that he doesn't want me here. And this environment, we lived in this environment that was super toxic. My dad, as long as he was in the house, my anxiety, I used to shake. My anxiety. I was terrified of this man, because you just never know. You just never know. And so, it just got to a point that it was just too much. Like, I'm reading, it's violence. I'm watering the plants outside, it's violence. Like, it was just crazy, because he would look for any reason whatsoever. And when it comes to beating, he beats you where you cannot be seen. He used to beat me with hangers, plastic hangers, welt on my back. I'm bleeding. He pinched, oh Lord, that man used to pinch me. He used to pinch here. He used to like pinching right here. You know? Make sure the skin is out. Like, it was ridiculous how my father. So we just got to this point. Looking at the outside, from the outside looking in, we looked like the perfect family. We had the perfect home. We had the 2-door garage with 2 SUVs with their names all queued up, Ranik 1 and Ranik 2. We looked like the perfect family, but we were miserable. Like, I used to hear my father coming home, because he loved loud music. I love loud music. Like, I have a lot of him in me. Obviously, I am his child. But ultimately, even if I was asleep, he was going to come wake me up to check my homework, and I better have not gotten anything wrong, because I'm going to get my ass beat. And so it was a constant state of cortisol, constant state of stress, constant state of alert, because you don't know where that blow is going to come from. You don't know what you did, you know? And so ultimately, I think we were only together for like maybe a year, so to speak. And he, one day, And this was the last encounter, I think, for us, that it just got to a point that, like, okay. So one day, I was cooking. Yeah, 10, 11. Yeah, 10 years old. I was cooking. Told you guys I didn't have much of a childhood. So I was cooking and my dad was out at the patio, smoking his cigars. My mom was watching some TV. And you see, I told you guys, micro, macro, everything management. My dad wants you to cook and stand over that stove, and you cannot leave that kitchen until that food is fully cooked. It doesn't even matter if it's rice. It doesn't matter what you're cooking. Not even something that you have to stand there and look, but control, control, control. So I was cooking in the kitchen, and so whatever was cooking was there, and I'm standing, I'm talking to my mom. And so whatever I was telling my mom, she was watching TV, and she's like, why are you talking from so far? Come, tell me what you need to tell me. So as I'm having a conversation with my mom, food is cooking, my dad is out smoking a cigar in the patio, and he walks in and he asks me what I'm doing, not overlooking the food. And I'm like, the food is cooking, it's fine. I'm having a conversation. I'm talking to mom. Guys, the beating that I got from this man because of the fact that I refused. Not refused, the fact that I was talking to my mother. That's the one that ended it all. Because he grabbed me, he threw me against the wall, and now it's fighting, it's shouting, it's my mom comes in between. No, you're not gonna touch my child, and then now he turned it against my mom. Now he wants to hit my mom, and then now I grab the phone and I'm like, if you touch my mother, I'm going to call 911. In fact, I dialed and I was like, here, just do something. And so my mom, in this state, she was stressed out, and she grabs her keys and she wants to run out and go. And I'm screaming and I'm yelling. I'm like, Mommy, do not leave me. Don't leave me with this man. Don't leave me with this man. I was terrified of my father. And that's what he wanted. He wanted us all in this state. It's control. It's fear. But as much as I was scared of what my dad would do to me, I knew that by no means is he touching my mother. And thus, this is why my father did not want me in America in the first place. Because he knew that not only did I threaten his secret, but I was probably the person who was going to be able to save my mother from him. And so after that night, my mom, on that night, my mom slept in my room, and she asked me, baby, what do you want to do? I told her, Mom, I want out. I want out of here. And I think in that situation, in that whole me being there, she was able to share this story with her friends and share with them what my dad was doing. And ultimately they were like, no, you're moving out and we're going to help you. And funny thing is, on their anniversary is the day that we left. My dad woke up in the morning, he was chipper and happy, and he, his friends, my mom had called his friend, and who I heard passed away, RIP in DC, but he got my dad out and they went partying or whatever, and my mom's friends came over, packed everything, and we were out. Well, everything. We packed our clothes. We left him with everything. My mom left him the house. She left him everything. And she's the one who had paid for most of everything. Remind you, she brought him from America, right? My mom used to work so hard, and to be honest, they work hard together. They were pretty great together in the sense of they build something. They work hard. I think she was the first person out of all the people who had come to buy a house. She was living that, perfect life that you would think, but nobody knew the hell that my mom was truly going through. And that this man had over and over really tried to kill my mother. And so, thankfully we moved out. We got a beautiful little place, Courtney Chase. My God, that house saved our lives. And we started small with an air mattress in the living room, and my mom just literally did her thing. And she created this environment, and it was just our home, and we loved it. But my mom really never dealt with she never addressed that situation with my dad. As soon as we left, he got on stalker mode. stalker mode. He would show up at the house. He would show up in my school. He would show up everywhere. And it's this unhealthy, toxic thing because it's about control. He's trying to get back control. He doesn't understand how we left him. How dare you leave me? I beat you, but you're not allowed to get out. You're not allowed to leave me. How dare you? And so it was stuck in this crazy way. And my mom was just working. She did not know how to deal with anything. She just put herself into work. There was no other way for her. That's how she dealt with it. That was her defense mechanism, was to put all her energy and everything into work. And for me, my defense mechanism was to check out repression, and of course, teenager. I was a teenager, and this is a point I'm starting to get attention from the boys, and ultimately, I still am trying to replace this toxic father that I have, because not only has he shown it was the most confusing thing, because he tells me he doesn't want me here, he blamed me for everything that happened, and then ultimately he would still tell me how he loved me, and he would constantly try to get me to kiss him on the lips to show people how much he loved me, and I hated it. I do not like my father. I don't like him because he was never there to protect me. All he has ever done is want to hurt me. Even until this very day, all my father does is celebrate my pain. And he wants me to be in pain. And he doesn't see me. And he doesn't hear me. All my dad ever does is talk about my mother. He is obsessed with my mom. And it's exhausting. And so my mom, of course, filed for divorce. But ultimately, she never tried to put me away from my dad. We tried to have a moment here and there. I think we had a Christmas together, just he and I. I was just super uncomfortable around that man. I always have been. And I was thankful that, he's not going to be a part of my life anymore. Because he never tried to work on himself. He was this toxic man, toxic environment. All he does is talk down on me. All he does is make me uncomfortable. All he does is just, ugh. And so eventually, yeah, of course, they got a divorce. And when they did get a divorce, my dad, he gave up his rights as a father. He said, I do not want to be a dad. I don't want to be a dad. I'm good. And no child support. He never paid child. He was supposed to. He never paid any child support. He didn't care because he didn't want me from the beginning. And obviously, I had ruined his life. And yeah, so I kind of it was strange, because now they would come and they would fight on my Facebook. My dad's strategy has always been, now I no longer have control of her mother. And because I don't have control of her mother, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hurt her child, because that's the only way to hurt her. And I was stuck on this loop of my dad constantly coming into my life and just trying to make sure I'm miserable. My dad, even till to this day, he celebrates my misery. He would see a picture. There's a day I remember, maybe I was maybe 18, 19 years old, and I don't know which baby, one of my cousins, my little cousins were born. And me, I love babies. I've taken care of these kids since they were all born. And so I had taken a picture with one of my little cousins, and he was like, oh, ha, 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 what is my grandchild's name? I knew you would get pregnant. That's my father. I told him, I'm so sorry. First of all, what makes you think that that's your grandchild? You disowned me. You said you wanted nothing to do with me. Literally. Other than giving up his rights in court, he told me, I am proud, I'm happy you were not named after my mother. You're not my child. And so somehow he pops up into my life, and he's like, oh, what's my grandchild's name? But at the same time, hoping that I had gotten pregnant and that was all I amounted to. Not God. So because of this, after this happened, my mom, of course, work busy. I was a little bit of a mess, to be honest, which is understandable, right? And so because of just how things were going for me, my mom was like, okay, I'm really not able to deal with what you're going through right now. And we were fighting. Oh my goodness, teenagers, hormones. And it was just a lot. I had not processed what had happened to me in my childhood. I had not processed what was happening with my dad. I had not processed all of it. And I was a teenager, and it was just a lot. And so she sent me to California because we have a lot of family there. And she was like, okay, there you'll be able to, have fun, see your cousins, and just like give me some time to be able to figure this out. And so I went to California. I ended up living with my aunt and some cousins. And I was enrolled in a school, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't. My way of dealing with this situation, other than repression, like I mentioned, is to read. I loved reading. I love reading because it was my way of escaping. I could get into a book and I could not have to face the reality that is my life. My favorite thing to read, and it was crazy because I realized this lately. I used to read books of children who are abused, children who I could relate to. Harry Potter, guys. Harry Potter honestly got me through the hardest moments of my life. A Child Called It, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Those were the books that I read. Push by Sapphire. I read these books and I related with these children who went through abuse. I related to these kids, and I was like, okay, you know what? If these kids can make it, so can I. I'm going to be okay. And my mom let me. She's like, whatever book you need, I will buy it. I don't care. You do what you need to do. Tell me how I can help you. And she really, really did try. So when I was in California, I started to skip school. I used to walk, and I would get to the doors in Albany High, and I would stand there and I would look around, and I would turn right around and go to the library, or go and walk up and down the streets of El Cerrito. I checked out. I didn't know what I was going through, but I felt abandoned. I was still confused about what happened with my parents. Still confused about what happened with my childhood. And now I'm here in California, and then there's an aunt of mine who I think she told me that I told her that I wanted to be a doctor. And so she came to school basically to like check the progress of my school. And so when she did come to my school, they came and they found out that Whitney has not been going to school, and I've been forging letters and, giving excuses as to why I'm not in school. And so it became this whole thing. Of course, they told my mom, and then now the cousins that I was living with, of course, the blame goes to them. Why she's skipping school, blah, 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 blah. And so one day I came home and I found all my stuff packed, and basically I was kicked out. I was like, okay, if you guys think you can do better, take her. Guys, yet again, I had been rejected by people who I thought loved me and thought like would finally save me from this madness that is my life. And it was, again, such a confusing place to be in. And for the most part, I just wish that somebody talked to me. For the longest time, I felt like people just kept on talking about me. But other than my mom, there's really nobody who actually asked me what was going on, And my auntie, I do have another aunt who, honestly, she did the best that she could. She loved on me when I was with her, and I loved being with them. And ideally, actually, that is the person who I was supposed to have lived with at the point when I went to California. But in America, we know about school zones. You have to live in specific places to go to a specific school. And this school was the best and is the best. Even till today here, there's a wait list for you to get into the school. So that's how I found myself in that position. And so, of course, those people were like, okay, no, like, give her to us. We'll take her. But my mom just saw me in that situation, and she was like, you know what? No. Let me just give me my child back. And so I went back to Florida, and but the thing that hadn't changed was the fact that my mom is still working crazy. And so I'm a teenager. I have a lot of time by myself in the house, and my friends, and most of my friends are boys. Trouble. So, and then there's that, of course, we're butting heads, teenagers, girls and their mothers, they don't know what happens. And so we just like really didn't get along, because I think I was still facing everything that had happened to me. And I didn't get therapy. I didn't go for counseling. I didn't go for anything. And so I had my repression. I had I lashed out because of my situation. Like, I was tired. I was very tired. And so I think, was it a year in? No, actually, it didn't last too long. I think it was maybe about one semester. And so I stayed in school one semester. My dad, of course, is still constantly showing up at my school. There's just so much drama that's happening there. The divorce is final at this point. And I think my mom, we were just butting heads so much. And my mom was just like, okay, I think the best thing for me to do right now is to just send her back to Kenya, because let her go back to my parents who have already raised her. You know, they know how to deal with her. And of course, my grandparents, they took me in with open arms, no questions. They were like, you know what, that's our baby. I did share the story about how that happened, but that was very hard on me, because once again, I had been displaced. Once again, I felt abandoned by my parents. Once again, I still hadn't dealt with everything that was happening, and now a culture shock back in Kenya. But God has a way of working things out. So I went through high school. I fought a lot with my grandparents. Oh my goodness, my grandfather and I butted heads. But I needed him. I needed them. And they gave me that stability that I needed. And no matter how much we fought, they never gave up on me. I don't know if they truly understood what it is that I was going through, but ultimately they just love me beyond that. They love me in my hard-headedness. They love me. And there are days my grandfather would be like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this child? But beyond that, he always reminded me that no matter what, I want you to know that we love you and that you're special to us and we're your family. You know, and I appreciate them so much for giving me that, because in all that ugly that I have gone through in my life, I am so thankful for all the people who loved on me unconditionally. You know, people who actually recognize that this child has gone through a lot, and what she needs is love. That's it. And so going through life, I just kind of went through life, and I did, go in and out of depression. I did go in and out of depression, and I didn't understand why. I fell in love, and when I did love, now because of the trauma, because of everything that I've gone through, I love people the way I wish I was loved, unconditionally, with all this intensity. And of course, when I was a teenager, it was much more. And so my first love, my gosh, my emotions were just like on system overload. I was happy that I found someone who loved me and seemed to love me. But then when we fought, my heartbreak was extra, because of all those things that I've repressed, all those things that have happened to me. When this person who loves me and seemed to love me so unconditionally, and teenage love, puppy love, when it didn't work out, oh man. So I remember a point in time, I don't know if it was our first fight or our last fight or whatever, but we had this big fight, and I had so much pain in my heart. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, oh my God, I am gonna die. What is going on? And I went to the dorm, and I grabbed a razor, and I think I'd seen it on TV about people cutting, and I cut myself. I needed the pain that I was feeling in my heart, in my body. I needed it out somehow. It was dumb. I hated it. I still have that mark to remind me, no, But ultimately, when we broke up, it took, oh my gosh, oh man, I don't even know what to say. And the worst thing about how we broke up is he kind of just ghosted me. He didn't communicate with me, and suddenly I was alone. And it was, again, all the abandonment issues. It was all, man, everything just kept on flooding me. Every time I would go through a heartbreak, every time that rejection happened, all those things that I had gone through would come rushing in. And it was just this cycle, So when I was in my teenage years, actually, when I was around 15, That's when I started to party. I started to go out. I started drinking. I started smoking weed. I started like smoking cigarettes. Actually, that's when I started smoking cigarettes. And I just tried to escape. I had these things that were constantly haunting me, constantly just there, lingering, and I didn't know what they were. And ideally, if you've seen me, you know me, I'm a happy person. I'm a happy child. But constantly, throughout these years, I never really quite understood why it was that there were some days that I could not even get out of bed. Some days I could not function. And they happened. They happen even till today. I have days that I'm like, oh, my life, sometimes it can be so overwhelming. And the way that I learned to deal with it, because first of all, nobody taught me how to deal with any of this. You know, my mom, her way is to shut out. So I shut out, shut down, and medicate. Even if it didn't take away what I was going through, for once, whatever that was going on in my head, whatever was happening in my heart, it was silent. For a few hours, for a day or two, I'm not going to have to deal with or address that pain that is in my heart. I don't have to think about it. And so for years and years, I've constantly been on this battle of self-medication and silence. And it's an up and down and depression. And it's like, why? Why am I like this? Why does this keep happening to me? And so I am so thankful to God, because I got to a place that I can understand these things, because I of course, I graduated high school. I went to college. I went to university, and I started with journalism, and somehow God directed me into psychology. And when I got into psychology, I started to understand what was happening with me. I started to understand, okay, this is my dad, and this is my mom, and this is why you did the things the way you did them. This is why you're depressed. This is why you have so much anxiety, because this is a lot, you know? And it helped me and to understand and to give myself grace, because I understood that for me, for most of my life, I've been on survival mode. When children were growing up and they were being, they were allowed to be children, and they lived their lives, and they grew up in a home where there was no violence, or they grew up without all this drama. They had and they have an advantage over me. You know, I try to understand why it is that I struggled with school so much. I am smart. I'm very smart. If you check my grades, most of my grades were A's and A's and A's. But when it came to the point of like depression, when it came to the divorce, when it came to all these things, my grades would tank. You know, there are days that, based on how my father treated me with books, that it was war when I come home with a B. I hated it. You know, when I was a kid, there was a point I didn't do my homework, and I came home one day and my teacher had written there, still not complete, and my uncle had asked me, Sonia, did you finish your homework? And I said I didn't. I said I did, but I hadn't. So when I got home that evening, he obviously opened my book and saw that no, I actually had not completed the homework. I had completed it after, when the teacher wrote, still not complete. And then I went and I finished the paragraph. And so he came and he opened my book. And of course he saw what the teacher had written. He told me, Sonia, you're a dead duck. You seeing the look on my face? What? My God. This man beat me. He beat me so much that even the house help who was there was like, okay, no, that's enough. I pissed myself, like, because of homework. You see, this is how people treat your children when you're not there. This is somebody who's my blood, flesh and blood, somebody who I loved. But ultimately, any mistake, wrath. After that beating, I couldn't sit for 2 weeks. I couldn't sit for 2 weeks. I would sit like this in my desk in class because I could not sit down. I literally physically could not sit down. I was swollen, welts. 2 weeks because I didn't finish my homework. And then I would get in trouble with the teachers because why are you disrupting the class? Why are you sitting like that? How am I going to explain that to my teachers and tell them that, okay, look, because I didn't finish my homework, this happened? Because if I told them, and then now, of course, they're going to call home, and then now if they call home, that's going to be a lot more war. So it was like I was between a rock and a hard place, and I didn't know what to do. But, and you see, because of those things, it's like you're always on guard, you're always on guard. And let me tell you, it even got to a point, I feel like I used to get beaten so much that it got to a point that I was just like, okay. I would lash out. I would steal money and go and buy candy. I would rebel. Because it doesn't matter anyway. They're still going to beat me. Whether I'm a good girl or a bad girl, they're still going to beat me. So I just kind of didn't care and did whatever I wanted to. I'm a free spirit, as you can see. But ultimately, it was such a twisted sense of my reality, you know. And it was like these little things, whatever little things that I would do, like the outcome or how these people would deal with it, it was like, yo, no room for mistakes. To be honest, I think that's why I'm such a free spirit, because it's like, okay, enough is enough. I'm done walking on eggshells and living in a way that I cannot breathe. I can't be me. I can't just make mistakes. I can't do anything because dare you make a mistake with me. The silent treatment. Abandonment. Like, I've already got used to these things a long time ago.